Funny, funny intro, funny, funny intro, funny, funny intro. I say a word, you do a laugh, then the song goes up. Hello everyone, my name's Stonesy Boy, and welcome back to Reading with Stonesy. Today is, it's normal, actually. It's, 21 pages. 21 savage, as I would say, because I'm a cool kid. I really need to get out of this house. Anyways, so today we're going to read, and it's not going to be that bad. Man. I love laying back in my chair and just being able to read all day. Signer things, you know? Anyways, let's begin. Chapter 32. 2 days later, a new kid was assigned to Group D. His name was Brian. But X-Ray called him Twitch, because he also is fidgeting. Twitch was assigned Zero's bed and Zero's crate. Vacancies didn't last long at Camp Green Lake. Twitch had been arrested for stealing a car. He claimed he could break into a car, disconnect the alarm, and hardwire the engine all in less than a minute. I never planned to, steal one, he told them. But sometimes, we walk past a real nice car, parked in the deserted area, and, I just start twitching. If you think I twitch now, you should see me when I'm around a car. Next thing I know, I'm behind the wheel, standing in the scratchy sheets. It occurred to him that his hot no longer smelled bad. He wondered if the smell had gone away or if he had gotten used to it. Hey, caveman, said Twitch. Do we really have to get up at 4:30? You get used to it, Stanley told him. It's the coolest part of the day. He tried not to think about Zero. It was too late. Either he made it to Big Thumb or... What worried him the most, however, wasn't that it was too late. What worried him the most is that he ate wasn't in size, was the fear that it wasn't too late. What if Zero was still alive, desperately crawling across the dirt searching for water? He tried to force an image out of his mind. The next morning, out on the lake, Stanley listened as Mr. Sir told Twitch the requirements for his hole. As wide and as deep as your shovel. Twitch fidgeted, his fingers drummed against the wooden shaft of the shovel, and his neck moved from side to side. You won't be twitching so much after digging all day, Mr. Sir told him. You won't have the strength to wiggle your pinky. He popped some sunflower seeds in his mouth, deftly chewed them, and spat out the shells. This isn't a Girl Scout camp. A water trip came shortly after sunrise. Stanley got in line behind Magnet ahead of Twitch. What if it's not too late? He watched Mr. Sir fill X-Ray's canteen. The image of Zero crawling across the hot, dry dirt remained in his head. But what could he do about it? Even if Zero was somehow alive for more than 4 days, how would Stanley ever find him? It would take days. He'd need a car. Or a pickup truck with a tank of water in the back. Stanley wondered if Mr. Sir had left the keys in the ignition. He slowly backed away from the line, then circled over to the side of the truck. He looked through the window. The keys were there, dangling in the ignition. Stanley felt his fingers start to twitch. He took the deep breath and readied himself to try to think clearly. He had never driven before. But how hard could it be? If it was really crazy, he told himself, whatever he did, he knew he would have to do it quickly before Mr. Sir noticed. It's too late, he told himself. Zero couldn't have survived. But what if it wasn't too late? He took another deep breath. Think about this, he told himself. There wasn't time to think. He flung over the door into the truck and climbed quickly inside. Hey, shouted Mr. Sir. He turned the key and stepped in the gas pedal. The engine revved. The truck didn't move. He pressed the pedal on the floor. The engine roared, but the truck was motionless. Mr. Sir came running on the side of the truck. The door was open. Put it in gear, shouted Twitch. The gear shifted in the floor next to the seat. Stanley pulled the lever back into the air and pointed the letter D for drive. The truck lurched forward. Stanley jerked back against the seat, tightly gripped the wheel, and the truck accelerated. His foot pressed on the floor. The truck went faster and faster across the dry lake bed. It bounced over a pile of dirt. Suddenly, Stanley was slammed forward, then instantly backward until the airbag exploded in his face. He fell in the open door and onto the ground. He had driven straight into a hole. He lay in the dirt, staring at the truck with stuck lopsided into the ground. He sighed. He couldn't blame his no good, dirty, rotten pig stew and great-great-grandfather this time. This time it was his own fault. 100%. He had probably done the stupidest thing he had ever done in a short and miserable life. He managed to get to his feet. He was sore but didn't think he had broken any bones. He glanced back at Mr. Sir, who remained where he was, staring at Stanley. He ran. His canteen was strapped around his neck. It banged against his chest as he ran. Every time it hit against him, it reminded him that it was empty, empty, empty. Chapter 33. He slowed to a walk. As far as he could tell, nobody was chasing him. He could hear voices coming from the back by the truck and he couldn't make out the words. Occasionally, he heard the revving of an engine, but the truck wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. He headed in what he thought was the direction of the Big Thumb. He couldn't see it through the haze. Walking helped him calm down, but allowed him to think clearly. He doubted he could make it to Big Thumb, but with no water in his canteen, he didn't want to risk his life on the hope that he'd find a refuge there. He'd have to return to camp. He knew that, but he was in no hurry. It would be better to return later, after everyone had a chance to calm down. As long as he'd come this far, he might as well look for Zero. As long as he'd come this far, he might as well look for Zero. He decided he could walk as long as he could until he was too weak to go any further. Then he'd turn around and go back. He smiled as he realized he wouldn't quite work. He could only go halfway as far as he thought he could go, and he'd still have its strength to return. Then he'd have to make a deal with the warden, tell her where he found Kate Laurel's swimsuit, and beg for mercy. He was surprised by how far out the holes extended. He couldn't even see the camp compound anymore, but he still kept passing holes. It was when he thought he passed the last hole when he came across another cluster of them, a little farther away. Back at the compound, they had dug in a systematic order, row upon row, allowing space for the water truck, but out there was no system. It was every once in a while, in a fit of frustration, the warden would just pick a spot random and say, "What the hell, dig here." It was like trying to guess the winning numbers in a lottery. Stanley found himself looking down into the hole he passed. He didn't admit to himself that he was looking for. After more than an hour was gone by, he thought he had surely seen the last hole, but then off to the left he saw another cluster of them. He didn't actually see the holes, he saw the mounds of dirt that surrounded them. He stepped over the mounds and looked into the first hole. His heart stopped. Down at the bottom was a family of yellow-spotted lizards. Their large red eyes looked up at him. He leapt back of the mountain and ran. He didn't even know they were chasing after him. He thought he might have seen one leap out of the hole. After he ran until he couldn't run any further, then collapsed. They hadn't come after him. He sat there a while and caught his breath. As he got back to his feet, he thought he noticed something on the ground, maybe 50 yards away. It didn't look like much, maybe it was a big rock, but in the land of nothingness, any little thing seemed unusual. He walked slowly toward it to counter the lizards that made him very cautious. It turned out to be an empty sack of sunflower seeds. He wondered if it was the same one Magnet had stolen from Mr. Sir, although it hadn't seemed likely. He turned it inside out and found one seed stuck to the burlap. Lunch. Chapter 34. The sun was almost directly overhead. He figured he would have to walk no more than another hour, maybe two, before he had to turn back. It seemed pointless. He could see that there was nothing ahead of him, nothing but emptiness. He was hot, tired, hungry, and most of all thirsty. Maybe he could just turn around now. Maybe he had already gone halfway and didn't know it. Then, looking around, he saw a pool of water less than 100 yards away from where he was standing. He closed his eyes and opened to make sure he wasn't imagining the pool, and the pool was still there. He hurried toward it. The pool hurried away from him, moving as he moved, stopping when he stopped. There wasn't any water. It was a mirage caused by the shimmering waves of heat rising over the dry ground. He kept walking, still carried his empty sack of sunflower seeds. He didn't know if it might find something to put it in. After a while, he thought he could make out the shape of the mountains through the haze. At first, he wasn't sure if it was some other kind of mirage, but the farther he walked, the clearer they came into view. Almost straight ahead of him, he could see what looked like a fist with his thumb sticking up. He didn't know how far away it was. 5 miles? 50 miles? One thing was certain. It was more than halfway. He kept walking toward it. Although he didn't know why, he knew he'd have to turn around before he got there. But every time he looked at it, it seemed to encourage him, giving him a thumbs-up sign. As he continued walking, he became aware of his large object on the lake. He could tell what it was, or even if it was natural or man-made, but it looked like a little fallen tree. Although it hadn't seemed likely a tree would grow around here. More likely it was a ridge of dirt and rocks. The object, whatever it was not in the way of Big Thumb, but off to the right. He tried to decide whether to go to it or continue toward Big Thumb, or maybe just turn around. There's no point in heading toward Big Thumb. He decided he would never make it. For all he knew, it was chasing a moon. But he could make it to the mysterious object. He changed directions. He doubted it was anything, but the fact that there was something in the middle of all this nothing made it hard for him to pass up. He decided to make the object the halfway point, and he hoped he hadn't already gone too far. He laughed to himself when he saw what it was. It was a boat, or part of a boat anyway. It struck him as funny to see a boat in the middle of a dry and barren wasteland, but after all, he realized it was once a lake. The boat lay upside down, half buried in the dirt. Someone may have drowned here, he thought grimly, at the same spot where he could very well die of thirst. And the same of the boat had been painted on the back. The upside-down red letters were peeled and faded, but Stanley could still read the name. Mary Lou. On the side of the boat, there was a pile of dirt and then a tunnel leading down below the dirt. The tunnel looked big enough for a good-sized animal to crawl through. He heard a noise. Something stirred under the boat and someone out. "Hey!" Stanley shouted, hoping to scare back inside. His mouth was very dry. It was hard to shout very loud. "Hey!" the thing answered weakly. Then a dark hand and an orange sleeve reached up out of the tunnel. Chapter 35. Zero's face looked like a jack-o'-lantern that had been left out for too many days past Halloween, half rotten, half sunken eyes with a drooping smile. "Is that water?" he asked. His voice was weak and raspy. His lips were so pale that they were almost white, and his tongue seemed to flop around uselessly in his mouth as he spoke, as if it kept getting in the way. "It's empty," said Stanley. He stared at Zero, not believing it was real. "I tried to bring you a whole water truck, but," he smiled sheepishly, "I drove it into a hole. I can't believe you're..." "Me neither," said Zero. "Come on, we gotta get back to the camp." Zero shook his head. "I'm not going back." "You have to. We both have to." "You want some sploosh?" Zero asked. "What?" Zero shaded his eyes arm. "It's cooler under the boat," he said. Stanley watched Zero crawl back through his hole. It was a miracle he was still alive, but Stanley knew he would have to get him back to camp soon, even if he had to carry him. He crawled after him and wasn't able to squeeze his body through the hole. He never would have fit when he first came to Camp Green Lake. He lost a lot of weight. As he pulled himself through, his leg struck something sharp and hard. It was a shovel. For a second, Stanley wondered how it got there, then remembered that Zero had taken it from striking Mr. Budensky. It was cooler under the boat, which was half buried in the dirt, with enough cracks and holes at the bottom of the boat now proof to provide light and ventilation. He could see empty jars shattered about. Zero held a jar in his hand, grunted, and tried to screw the lid. "What is it?" "Sploosh." His voice was strained and worked on the jar. "That's what I call it. A bird under the boat." He couldn't get the lid off. "I found 16 jars here. Hand me a shovel." Stanley didn't have a lot of room to move. He reached behind him, grabbed the wooden end of the shovel, and held it out to Zero, blade first. "Sometimes you just have to," Zero said, and he hit the jar against the blade of the shovel, breaking the top of the jar clean off. He quickly brought the jar to his mouth and licked the sploosh of the jagged edges before it spilled. "Careful," Stanley warned. Zero picked up a cracked lid and licked the sploosh off as well. Then he handed the broken jar to Stanley. "Drink some." Stanley held it in his hand and stared at it for a moment. He was afraid of the broken glass. He was also afraid of the sploosh. It looked like mud. Whatever it was, he realized it must have been in the boat after the boat sank. That meant it was probably over 100 years old. Who knew what kind of bacteria might be living in it? "It's good," said Zero, encouraging him. He wondered if Zero had heard of bacteria. He raised the jar in his mouth and took a sip. It was warm, bubbly, mushy nectar, sweet and tangy. It felt like heaven as flowed out of the dry mouth and down his parched throat. He thought it might have been some kind of fruit at the same time, perhaps peaches. Zero smiled at him. "I told you it was good." Stanley didn't want to drink too much, but it was too good to resist. They passed the jar back and forth until it was empty. "How many are left?" he asked. "None," said Zero. Stanley's mouth dropped. "Now I should have to take you back," he said. "I'm not digging any more holes," said Zero. "They won't make you dig," Stanley promised. "They'll probably send you to a hospital like Barfbag." "Barfbag stepped on a rattlesnake," said Zero. Stanley remembered how he almost done the same. "I guess he did hear the rattle. He did that on purpose, Zero. You think?" He took off his shoe and sock first. Stanley shivered. He tried to imagine it. What's Maria Luou? Asked Zero. "What?" Zero concentrated hard. Mara Luou. "I have no idea." "I'll show you," said Zero. He crawled back out from under the boat. But Stanley followed. Back outside, and he had his shield aside from the brightness. Zero walked around the back of the boat and pointed the upside-down layer. "Mara Lou." Stanley smiled. "Mary Lou. It's the name of the boat." "Mary Lou," Zero repeated, studying the layers. "I got it. E makes a Y sound." "It does," said Stanley. But not when it's on the end of the word. Sometimes Y is a vowel and sometimes it's a consonant. Zero suddenly groaned. He grabbed his stomach and bent over. "Are you alright?" Zero grabbed to the ground and landed on his side with his knees pulled up to his chest. He continued to groan. Stanley watched helplessly. He wondered if it was like a sploosh. He looked back toward Camp Green Lake. At least he thought it was the direction of Camp Green Lake. He wasn't entirely sure. Zero stopped moaning as he slowly unbent. "I'm taking you back," said Stanley. Zero managed to sit up. He took several deep breaths. "Look, I got a plan and you won't get in trouble," Stanley assured him. "Remember when I found the old tube? Remember I gave it to X-Ray when the warden went crazy making us dig where she thought X-Ray found it? I think I'd tell the warden where I actually found it. Then she would let us off." "I'm not going back," said Zero. "You've got nowhere else to go," said Stanley. Zero said nothing. "You'll die out here," said Stanley. "Then I'll die out here." Stanley didn't know what to do. He had to come to rescue Zero and instead drank the last of his sploosh. He looked off into the distance. "I want you to look at something." "I'm not. I just want you to look at the mountain up there. You see the one that's something sticking up on it?" "Yeah, I think." "What does it look like to you?" "What does it look like?" "Anything?" Zero said nothing. As he studied the mountain, his right hand only formed into a fist. He raised his thumb. His eyes went from the mountain to his hand, then back to the mountain. Chapter 36. They put 4 of the unbroken jars in a burlap sack in case he might be able to use them. Stanley carried the sack and Zero held the shovel. "I should warn you," Stanley said, "I'm not exactly the luckiest guy in the world." Zero wasn't worried. "When you spend your whole life living in a hole," he said, "the only way you can go is up." They gave each other another thumbs up sign and headed to the hottest part of the day. Stanley, empty canteen was still strapped around his neck. He thought back of the water truck and wished he at least stopped and filled his canteen before running off. They hadn't gone very far before Zero, another attack. He clutched his stomach and he let himself fall to the ground. Stanley could only wait for it to pass. The sploosh had saved Zero's life, but now it was destroying him from the inside. He wondered how long it would take before he, too, felt the effects. He looked at Big Thumb. It wouldn't seem any closer than when they first started out. Zero took a deep breath and managed to sit up. "Can you walk?" Stanley asked him. Just give a second," Zero said. He took another breath, then using his shovel, pulled back to his feet. He gave Stanley a thumbs up sign. They continued. Sometimes Stanley would try to go for a long while without looking at Big Thumb. He'd make a mental snapshot of how it looked, and wait maybe 10 minutes before looking at it again, to see if it seemed closer. It never did. It was like chasing the moon, and if they ever reached it, he realized they would have to still climb it. I wonder who she was, said Zero. Who? Mary Lou, said Zero. Stanley smiled. I guess she was once a real person on a real lake. It was hard to imagine. I bet she was pretty, said Zero. Someone must have loved her a lot to name a boat after her. Yeah, said Stanley. I bet she looked great in a bathing suit, sitting on the boat while her boyfriend rowed. Zero used a shovel with a third leg. 2 legs weren't enough to keep him up. I'd stop to rest, he said after a while, and Stanley looked at the big thumb and still didn't look any closer. He was afraid if Zero stopped, he might never get started again. We're almost there, he said. He wondered which was closer, Cramp Green Lake or Big Thumb. Yeah, I really have to sit down. You see, if you can go a little, Zero collapsed. The shovel stayed a fraction of a second longer, perfectly balanced on the tip of the blade. Then it fell next to him. Zero knelt, bent over his head to the ground. Stanley could hear a very low moaning sound coming from him. He looked at the shovel and couldn't help but think he might need to dig a grave, Zero's last hole. And who would dig a grave for me, he thought. But Zero did get up, once again flashing thumbs up. Give me some words, he said weakly. It took Stanley a few seconds to realize what he meant. Then he smiled and said, R-U-N. Zero sounded out for himself. Run. Good. F-U-N. Fun. The spelling seemed to help Zero. It gave him something to concentrate on besides the pain and weakness. It struck Stanley as well. The next time he looked up the big thumb, it really didn't seem closer. They quit spelling words and it hurt too much to talk. Stanley's throat was dry. It was weak and exhausted. Yet, as bad as it felt, he knew that Zero felt 10 times worse. As long as Zero could keep going, he could keep going too. It was possible, he thought. He hoped that he didn't get a bad bacteria. Zero hadn't been able to unscrew the lid. Maybe the bad germs couldn't get in, either. Maybe the bacteria were only in the jars which opened easily, the ones he was now carrying in his sack. That scared Stanley the most about dying and his actual death. He figured he could handle the pain. It wouldn't be much worse than he felt now, in fact. Maybe at the moment of death he would be too weak to feel the pain. Death would be a relief. That worried him was most of his thought of his parents not knowing what happened to him, not knowing whether he was dead or alive. He hated to imagine what it would be like for his mother and father, day after day, month after month, not knowing, living on the false hope for him at least, where it would be over for his parents and the pain would never end. He wondered if the warden would send out a search party to look for him. It wasn't seem likely. She didn't send anyone to look for Zero, but if no one cared about Zero, they simply destroyed his files. But Stanley had a family. He couldn't pretend he was never here. He wondered what he would tell them, and when. What do you think's up there? Zero asked. Stanley looked at the top of Big Thumb. Oh, probably an Italian restaurant, he said. Zero managed to laugh. I think I'll get a pepperoni pizza and a large root beer, said Stanley. I want an ice cream sundae, said Zero, with nuts, whipped cream, and bananas and hot fudge. The sun was almost directly in front of them. The thumbs started up toward it. They came to an end of the lake. White, huge stone cliffs rose up before them. Unlike the eastern shore where Camp Green Lake was situated, the western shore did not slope down gradually. It was as if they'd been rocking across the flat bottom of a giant frying pan, and now they had somehow climbed up out of it. I know they could no longer see Big Thumb. The cliffs blocked their view. The cliffs also blocked out the sun. Zero growled and clutched his stomach, and he remained standing. I'm all right, he whispered. Stanley saw a rut, about a foot wide and 6 inches deep, climbing down the cliff. On either side of the rut there was a series of ledges. Let's try there, he said. It looked to be about a 50-foot climb, straight up. Stanley still managed to hold the sack of jars with his left hand as he slowly moved up from ledge to ledge, crisscrossing the rut. At times he had to use the side of the rut for support, in order to make it in the next ledge. Zero stayed with him somehow. His frail body trembled terribly as he climbed the stone wall. Some of the ledges were wide enough to sit on. Others stuck out no more than a few inches, just enough for a quick step. Stanley stopped about 2/3 of the way up on a fairly wide ledge. Zero came up alongside him. You okay? Stanley asked. Zero gave him a thumbs up sign. Stanley did the same. He looked above them. He wasn't sure how he'd get to the next ledge. It was 2 or 3, 4 feet outlook over his head, and he didn't see any footholds. It was straight look down. Give me a boost, said Zero, then I'll pull you up with the shovel. You won't be able to pull me up, said Stanley. Yes, I will, said Zero. Stanley cupped his hands together, and Zero stepped on the interwoven finger. It was able to lift Zero high enough for him to grab the protruding slab of rock. Stanley continued to help him below as Zero pulled himself onto the ledge. While Zero was letting himself situated up there, Stanley attached the sack of the shovel by poking a hole through the burlap. He held it up to Zero. Zero first grabbed hold of the sack, then the shovel. He let the shovel go so half the blade was supported by a rock slab. The wooden shaft hung around Stanley. Okay, he said. Stanley doubted it would work, but one thing for him to lift Zero, who was half his weight, and quite the other for Zero to try to pull him up. Stanley grabbed the hold of the shovel and he climbed up the rock wall, using the size of the rut to help support him. His hands moved one or the other, up the shaft of the shovel. He felt Zero's hand clasp his wrist. He let go of the shaft in one hand and grabbed the top of the ledge. He gathered the strength for the brief second, seemed to defy gravity as he took a quick step up the wall and, with Zero's help, pulled himself the rest of the way over the ledge. He caught his breath. There was no way he could have done that a few months ago. He noticed a large spot of blood on his wrist. It took him a moment to realize it was Zero's blood. Zero's had deep gashes in both hands. He had it on the metal blade of the shovel, keeping it in place as Stanley climbed. Zero brought his hands to his mouth and sucked up his blood. One of the glass jars was broken in the sack. They decided to save the pieces. They might need it to make a knife or something. They rested briefly, then continued on up. It was fairly easy to climb the rest of the way. And they reached the flat ground. Stanley looked up to see the sun, a fiery ball glancing at the top of Big Thumb. God was throwing a basketball. Soon as they were walking in the long, thin shadow of the thumb. And that's the end of that, if I'm not mistaken. So, let's see. Did I title this right? Yes I did, 166. I thought I titled it 165, but whatever. So, here's a fun fact. There's a movie about this book. And it's apparently really good. Personally, I always think books are better than movies, because you get more expedition and detail. Like, I can't wait to read the Game of Thrones books, because I know those are going to be so much better. Oh, but still. I hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. People like, be fish, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more reading content such as this. And I guess I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Oh, also, 21-minute video for 21 pages. Funny, huh? Bye-bye.